President Cyril Ramaphosa will know today whether he must answer before a parliamentary impeachment committee. The Western Cape High Court is set to deliver its judgment regarding Ramaphosa's request to suspend the activities of Parliament's impeachment committee. Now, the president is asking for a temporary halt while he reviews the Section 89 independent panel's report, which determined that he has a case to answer related to the Phala Phala theft. Meanwhile, Parliament's Section 89 impeachment committee agreed on Wednesday to give political parties until today to submit additional nominations for an evidence leader and work towards consensus. For an analysis now, we are joined by Stellenbosch University Director of the School of Public Leadership, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, and political analyst and parliamentary correspondent for Business Day, Roos. Pleasure having both of you. Thank you so much for your time. Let me begin with you, Prof, because I suppose what many people are thinking at this point, what are the chances that the full bench accepts Ramaphosa's argument that a public parliamentary inquiry based on a allegedly flawed Section 89 report will cause him harm and humiliation before his main review is heard in September?
Good morning to you, Leanne, and good morning to my colleague and your listeners. Leanne, this is a very important court judgment. It would actually be a test of executive accountability. I think whatever happens today would then determine as to whether accountability can be enforced. Those who are in charge of the executive can be forced to be accountable. The likelihood, in my view, would be that the question that the court must be able to grapple with and answer as they present the judgment is that the argument presented by the president around the fact that the Ndevu Commission did not have all the evidence to come to the conclusion that they've come to, and secondly, the irreparable harm that might be caused to his image by whatever might transpire out of this particular committee, were things that could have been dealt with at the earlier stage, or things that could the president being put under review immediately after this committee has issued its finding. Because you must remember that the public perception, even when the parliament rejected the finding of the committee, was that there is something that is being hidden. And I think it was the president's responsibility at that time to then clarify these issues through proper processes. And I think at this stage, it might be very late for him to do that. But it is for the court to decide as to whether he has made a very valid argument around this. But my question would be, is public humiliation, is the fact that there is a process that might at the end vindicate him, not outweighs the arguments that he has put before the courts?
So, Tara, let me come to you, because there are obviously broader political consequences for the president and the GNU if the Western Cape rules against his interdict request. Let's perhaps look at those angles.
So we're looking at one of three options here today. The court could dismiss the application, allowing the impeachment committee continue, and grant the application to temporarily halt the committee. So this makes the procedure ruling much more narrower. You know, if President Ramaphosa loses today, the impeachment committee resumes its work immediately. And this would be a politically significant setback for the president, because he could be called to testify before September, before the review is heard. This is quite unlikely that he will be called before September, because Parliament is going back on the 3rd of August from its recess break. It is then only in session for a month before it needs to go on another recess break. We then have to factor in the election, which is also going to take significant time off the parliamentary calendar. And so it's unlikely he will testify before September, but we don't know what the committee is going to push for in terms of time. We also don't know what's going to happen with the review application. If Ramaphosa does win today, the impeachment committee is halted completely, and Parliament would need to reconsider aspects of the process depending on the judgment. So would they still be able to appoint an evidence leader in the interim, or would they need to wait until the review in September? And this would really strengthen Ramaphosa's legal position when it comes to the review, but it's not going to end the political discourse on Phala Phala entirely.
Yeah, and that's, obviously that's an important note, because that's something that is going to go ahead, and we'll pick that up as well in terms of how the committee has continued its work nonetheless. But Prof, in terms of this legal challenge, what is the impact on public trust and accountability mechanisms that are specifically designed to police high-ranking officials under our Constitution?
As you would know, Leanne, that public trust is already very low within public. People do not trust public institutions. They also do not trust officials that run these institutions, especially political office bearers. Whatever the outcome of this particular case would certainly have a huge impact on public trust. If it rules in President Ramaphosa's favor, the perception out there would be that there is something that he is hiding, even if indeed he wants to present evidence that would resonate or clear him of any wrongdoing. But the perception would be that he is hiding something. Even if the court also does not rule in his favor, the legitimacy of the process would still be under question until we see the outcomes of this particular process. So either way, there might be issues of public trust. But what would make people believe that this process might be a process that would come out with the outcomes that are fair, it is when the judges are very clear that by ruling against President Ramaphosa, they are not taking his rights to present evidence that could be compelling, or evidence that he thinks would clear his name and indicate whether this was a legit transaction or not. So that if that happens, that would help. The committee itself, how it conducts itself, how it would then undertake its work going forward, would also either bring trust in the process or deter trust from that process itself. So what people in public office do, intentionally or unintentionally, is important in terms of public trust.
So Tara, in terms of today's ruling, would it alter the strategic landscape ahead for the full review application scheduled for September, or is it really just sort of business as usual until that arrives? But let's talk about how either scenario in terms of the landscape.
So we really need to look at what Ramaphosa is arguing in this interdict application. He is saying that the process is actually constitutionally flawed, and he contends that Parliament has failed to follow lawful and fair processes by starting this impeachment committee. And a central point to his counsel's argument was that if they continued with the committee before the review was handed down, that would cause irreparable harm to the president's reputation. So if the president is granted the interdict today, it will strengthen his legal argument that the process is constitutionally flawed, but it has absolutely no effect on what happens with the review application. Conversely, if he loses today, I think there will be reputational damage to Ramaphosa as a whole, because the public will say, actually, look, the interdict hasn't been granted. And more anticipation will be placed on the review committee and the outcome of the review committee if the impeachment committee is allowed to continue. Because Parliament's argument that they made is they're saying that the impeachment committee is a parliamentary function that the courts should be reluctant to interfere with. And this is a separate process from the review committee, but it does play a big role in public perception and how the president is viewed, particularly ahead of local government elections coming in November.
And that's a very important aspect here. So, that's something that people will keep in their psyche and understand. But Prof, given that Section 89 sets a very high bar for removing a sitting president, does pausing the process actually interfere with the administrative duty of Parliament to execute its constitutional mandates? Because, we've already seen it's moving fast. We're already getting nominations for evidence leaders. Things are happening behind the scenes.
Would remember that Parliament is wary of a constitutional court that would find them to have not exercised their function, because on 2 occasions they have been called to order or been found to have not exercised their function. So Parliament is treading carefully to ensure that it exercises its responsibility of holding the executive accountable. And I do think that even if this process does not proceed immediately, because the judgment would probably be in favor of Ramaphosa invariably if that happens. The parliament would still have to go through with their processes of appointing a evidence leader. In the meantime, I think they should start doing that so that the groundwork can be done. And because if that does not happen, then accountability would not be seen to be happening. Those who are in office would not be seen to be held accountable. And as my colleague has said, there are local government elections in the horizon, and one does not want to create an impression that there are things that are hidden. So I think it is in the interest of Parliament, it is in the interest of all role players to ensure that this process continues speedily, this process is concluded as soon as possible. The issue of reputational harm, I think this is unavoidable. Even if the court were to rule in President Ramaphosa's side, as I indicated, perception within the public domain would be that there is something that is hiding.
So I mean, Tara, opposition parties surely are going to, in the impeachment committee, are going to leverage the court's decision, win or lose, to drive a narrative regarding the Phala Phala saga moving forward. I mean, it's almost like a golden card for them in a way.
Absolutely. We saw when the arguments were being heard just last week how the MK party was protesting in front of the High Court. They had many supporters coming out with banners talking about the president stealing money from the country, talking about how Phala Phala was a crime. This is truly a golden egg for opposition parties because win or lose, they can drive a political narrative heading into local government elections. And that is particularly important. When we contrast the ad hoc committee and the politicking that happened in the ad hoc committee now going into the impeachment committee, we saw how many opposition parties used the ad hoc committee as a leverage point to gain their members more public prominency. And that will definitely happen in the impeachment committee. Moreover, if the impeachment committee calls President Ramaphosa for the opposition members of that committee to interrogate the president for 30 minutes each, that is going to be a golden opportunity for these parties to dig into the president and to drive a key political narrative.
I'm interested to get your views on this, Professor, because, I mean, halting Parliament Section 89 committee via a court interdict, surely this, I mean, the highest court in the land, the Constitutional Court, has said this must go ahead, but now interdicting this, doesn't this set a dangerous precedent where the executive can almost indefinitely delay legislative oversight through litigation?
We have actually seen this happening many times, where the executive using public resources to actually halt processes of accountability. And this is something that we are also seeing that it might lead to that. And this is unfortunately where political parties and politicians themselves don't realize the importance of ensuring that this public trust that they are given by the people to actually lead on their behalf is not eroded. And what we are seeing currently is a president that wants to delay a process that could clear him, or a process that could bring evidence that he says is ordinarily not in the public domain, that could clear his name. So that does not help him in the public eye. It also does not help with accountability, because these are public resources that are used for these processes that could actually be used for other service delivery issues. So it is important not to halt a process of this nature for this long. As you have indicated, we have seen precedences first that have taken us in this route, and later on, Parliament is found wanting when it's held accountable. And no one wants that to happen again.
Yeah,
including the president.
Absolutely. Tara, I want to talk a little bit about, as we mentioned, and we spoke a bit earlier, saying that, you know, the committee's work is still continuing. We've even got shortlisted candidates. I want to talk a little bit to those candidates, if we can just pause on that ruling, because we're predicting at the moment and looking at the consequences. But I want to look at the work that the committee is continuing to do, and we look at some of the names. That itself has become a little bit controversial. Advocate Vuyani Ngolwana, also some questions about Advocate Kate Hofmeyr. Talk to me about some of the nominations that we've seen coming through this week.
The difficulty that Parliament faces now is twofold. Firstly, can they find senior counsel that is available? We saw there were a list of initially 9 names put forward. Out of those, only 3 were available. That is why they extended the nomination process until this morning. This is going to be a very long, taxing process, and you need someone with 15 years of experience in order for them to qualify to be the SE and the evidence leader for this inquiry. Conversely, this is a very politically sensitive case, an inquiry. So many of the concerns of the names given was that, when we look at Prof. he had made public comments about Phala Phala. He did state to Parliament that his public views expressed about the interdict and about the panel review were his own and wouldn't impair his judgment if he had to become the evidence leader. But Leanne, it's going to be very difficult to find someone, particularly of that level, high ranking, who has not made a public comment about Phala Phala, about the case in itself, about the panel review, about the legal implications thereof, or even about the interdict. This is something that the legal community at large has been weighing in on since its inception, if we had to go all the way back to 2022. And so Parliament faces a very difficult process to try and find the right evidence leader, because the evidence leader can really make or break the inquiry in itself.
It certainly can. Can I put you both on a limb here and ask you what you think is going to happen today? It's predicting. It's like trying to predict who's going to win a soccer match. We don't know the answer. We're just predicting with the facts that we know. Prof, do you want to hazard a guess? What do you think is going to happen today?
My expectation today would be that the court should clearly clarify the role of this committee in terms of the issues that are raised by the president around sufficient evidence as to whether this is the process is constitutional or not. And I think the clarity must be a clarity that a man on the street can be able to understand, whether it judges in favor of the president or against the president. But the clarity that is given, it must be a clarity that a man on the street can understand. It is clarity that would help people to see that accountability is happening. Because if it does not, if it still raises more questions, then people are going to start losing trust in the system, and this might impact on the standing of the courts itself on this particular matter.
Tara, very quickly, your final thoughts?
I think that they're going to grant the interdict, Leanne. After being in court, after hearing the arguments made by the prospective counsels, I do think it was a very difficult challenge to argue, but I think Ramaphosa's counsel ultimately came out on top in terms of argumentation, and I think that they will grant the interdict today.
Well, we wait and see. We'll find out today. Pleasure speaking to both of you, political analyst and parliamentary correspondent for Business Day, Tara Roos, and Stellenbosch University Director of the School of Public Leadership, Professor Zwelinzima Ndevu, giving us analysis on that Western Cape High Court, which today is set to deliver its judgment regarding President Ramaphosa's request to suspend the activities of Parliament's impeachment committee.